Hi, I'm Yaakov Katz, and welcome to a new episode of the Jewish People Policy Institute's Inside Analysis on the state of affairs in Israel and the Jewish world. Absurd and scary is the only real way to think about what has happened this week and how the world has turned against Israel. It's absurd because accepting the ICC prosecutor Karim Khan's decision to recommend that arrest warrants be issued against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister Yoav Gallant would be the equivalent in my mind of issuing warrants against Adolf Hitler, but also FDR and Winston Churchill back in the 1940s had the court been around back then. I think most people would agree that doing so would have been absurd. But the situation is also scary because Karim Khan's announcement shows what happens when the world turns on the Jewish state, how quickly the situation escalates, where it leads, and what comes next. And this past week was a quick-paced blow-by-blow against Israel, from the ICC announcement to the decision and prize to terrorism that the leaders of Ireland, Norway, and Spain made with their decision to unilaterally recognize a Palestinian state. And while this recognition will not have immediate practical impact on Israel, it shows how far the world has moved on since October 7th. Yes, there are people who still pay lip service to the fact that there was a massacre against Israelis on that day. And yes, there are still hostages being held by Hamas. We saw just this past 48 hours the video of the female soldiers, the Tatzpitaniyot, who were taken from Nahal Oz, and that can only shake you at your core. But the heads of state of Ireland, Norway, and Spain believe that the Palestinians deserve independence right now. Really? Right now? Because what? They've shown what? That they know how to murder Jews? On today's episode, we're going to talk to two people. Colonel Robert Neufeld, a senior fellow at the Jewish People Policy Institute and an expert in international law. Robert spent many years in the Military Advocate General's office of the IDF. He was the legal advisor to a number of branches of the Israeli military, including Aman, Agaf HaModi'in, military intelligence. And we also speak with Ambassador Avi Gil. Avi is a longtime diplomat and a senior fellow at the Jewish People Policy Institute, and he was the Director General of the Foreign Ministry back in the period when Shimon Peres was the foreign minister. So we're going to talk to Avi and Robert about what are the implications from a legal perspective, as well as from a diplomatic perspective for Israel from the ICC decision, and what does this all mean, not just for the country, not just for its future, but also politically for its prime minister. Here we go.
So, Robert, I thought we'd start with you. Obviously, a lot is being said about the ICC and the consequences and implications of what this means for Israel, what it means in particular for Prime Minister Netanyahu and for Defense Minister Gallant. But give us kind of the legal consequences or significance of this for Israel.
Okay, so Yaakov, there's the closer circle, the inner circle. What will happen to those that, if those arrest warrants are approved, what will happen to them? And then the larger circle with the national level, which also has some bearings. It's close also to the diplomatic issue, but there are legal applications. As to the inner circle, well, basically there are 123 or 4 countries who are members of the Rome Statute, and all these countries have a duty to arrest anyone who is under an arrest warrant by the ICC. So basically, that will close most of Europe, Australia, Canada, and it's a serious issue. I remember Putin was anxious to go into South Africa, but couldn't go there, and eventually didn't because of the arrest warrant the prosecutor got against him. So for those who have an arrest warrant against them, it's a real issue. And there's on the national level, there could be applications because there are many countries whose legislation do not allow economic ties, or mostly sending weapons to a country which is accused with committing war crimes and crimes against humanity. So before even going further, there could be huge applications as to those arrest warrants against the Prime Minister and the government.
So, Avi, I mean, there's a lot of elements to look at this also from the diplomatic perspective. And we're going to go back to the legal in a moment also. But, I was in the US this week. And for example, you see on television, just from a image perspective, right? People are looking at Israel. And when they're watching the news, and what do they see? Israel mentioned as genocide, starving Gaza, and our leaders now are wanted by the ICC. Whether it's real, it's fake, it's absurd, it's insane, it's crazy. All that's true, but this is a bad look for the state of Israel. So diplomatically speaking, this is very damaging.
Absolutely. I think that on every aspect of the national equation of security, you have potential damage already, big damage being done. It's on the security domain, on the economic domain, diplomatic domain, obviously. And I think that we have to look at the immediate impact on the war itself, whether it would hamper Israel from achieving the initial goals of the war. And then the second question, but not the last one, is whether it would impact on the nature of the day after the war. So these are really important questions which has to do with national security of Israel and its future. And among the various elements that you see at this stage is the growing dependence of Israel in the United States. It is being isolated almost everywhere. And therefore, the leverage that the United States has at this moment vis-a-vis Israel is growing bigger.
Well, I don't want to sound too cynical, but the leverage is particularly great for Netanyahu because it might be the only country that he can actually go on vacation to in the coming years. So I'll definitely want to try to stay on good terms with the United States. But Avi, just explain to us quickly the immediate implication on the war and what you meant by the implication on the day after the war.
Well, Israel is, with regard to the war, Israel hasn't yet achieved the goals it set for itself for this war, namely the dismantling the military power of Hamas, its civilian power and control of Gaza, and it didn't return back the hostages. So what we've seen in Hague and deterioration of the Israeli stature in the world arena, the growing criticism that may cause Israel to stop the war before it achieved her goals. So this is with regard to the war. With regard to the day after, what you see already is the growing appetite of the world and the Western world, so to speak, the friends of Israel, to push much harsher on Israel to agree, to accept their formula for a permanent solution. And already you've seen more Western countries which are announcing that they are recognizing the state of Palestine. So this is a very...
Right, Norway, Ireland, and Spain for now. Right.
That's right. That's right. And that may be only the beginning amongst the Western world, because the other part of the world already recognized Palestine as a state. So, and it has an effect on the nature of the endgame. So these are main, but not only, important aspect of the impact of the decision of the ICC.
So, Robert, one of the things that I found to be interesting, and was the fact that the decision by Karim Khan, the ICC prosecutor, he's decided to recommend warrants to be issued against 3 Hamas leaders, Muhammad Def, Yahya Sinwar, and Ismail Haniya. So 2 of them, the military leaders, 1 of them, the political leader in Doha, that's Haniya. In Israel, no military officers, not the chief of staff, not the head of the Southern Command, no one from the military, just the politicians. What does that tell us about this decision?
First of all, it's a very interesting decision without a clear answer for it for now. Okay. One thing which is concerning that I have to say is that there could be arrest warrants which are sealed, which are not nobody knows about them. Okay. Arrest warrants need not to be just published, so there could be surprises on the way. So that is very troubling. So I cannot say that it's that will be the end of it. Okay, these are maybe only the first arrest warrants, like opening the gate after that the convoy will pass and more arrest warrants will be issued. It seems to me like it's a message to saying that the political side is is aimed at this point by Khan, because the decisions, I guess, because the decisions about the issue of getting aid, humanitarian aid into Gaza, were made on those levels at the end of it. I think this is where it starts. Most that I didn't mention that before, because most of the crimes that Netanyahu and Gallant are accused are around the issue of starvation. That's the big issue that splits into many different crimes that the prosecutor he flagged, and this is what he's after. There could be other issues on the way, but that's the general framework for the crimes that he's aiming at. So you could see exactly on the Palestinian side, on the Hamas side, and it's a terrible thing to even put us together, right? But the Hamas side, his focus is on October 7 and on the hostages. That's it. No other war crimes perpetrated by Hamas, according to the Khan. It's not his focus. And on our side, it's the issue of starvation. That's the main issue that he's after. It's a very interesting choice, a very problematic choice by Khan, and I would even risk saying it's low risk of actual being convicted for. It's a very difficult crime to prove. So there's many questions why this crime was chosen, and as a lot of different legal applications that made Khan also jungle around the international law just to get it into to the arrest warrant.
What are the tools that Israel has, Robert, to combat this? In other words, beyond, and I'll talk to Avi more about the diplomatic and what he mentioned before about the reliance on the United States. I mean, obviously, one of the things that I find to be deeply absurd, right, is, you said the comparison and putting Israeli leaders in the same pool as the Hamas leaders. I mean, what I was saying to people this week is like, imagine in the 1940s, you had the ICC and they said, yeah, we're going after Adolf Hitler, but also FDR and Winston Churchill. I mean, but what are the tools that Israel has, if any, to do anything here?
So Israel is a bit in a peculiar position here. Most of the tools are on Avi's side, on the relying on the help of America mostly. That would be, I think, the key issue here. I'm not sure America will help, but that's much more effective. Originally, what Israel was thinking is that we have the issue of complementarity that would serve some kind of a shield, which means what is complementarity? The ICC is not supposed to investigate and indict people if the country that is in charge of these people, it belongs to, is investigating itself. And only unless that country, meaning here Israel, is either unwilling or unable to investigate itself, and we all know we have a very good and independent legal system here in Israel. Only in that case, the ICC should go into action. That's also a very interesting and problematic decision by Khan, going for arrest warrants before even letting the country see if they can go on. It's not like, the Attorney General here did not file already a pending criminal case against the Prime Minister. It's easy to see that even the Prime Minister here in Israel is not above the law, like in other countries. So that's a very, adding to the pile of problems with Khan's decision to go with the arrest warrants. That's just one of them. But complementarity is the key legal tool that Israel could have used. Argue here. It could argue before the ICC, and it could take actions independently without the ICC, without communicating with the ICC. That will actually check it, investigate ourselves if we're okay with this issue of starvation. And that will put the ICC in a bigger problem, even if you do not want to create with us further down the road.
I mean, the one risk with that is that Israel essentially would be showing that it's complying to some extent, or it's not just ignoring. And I mean, obviously, we're not ignoring, right?
First of all, of course, we cannot ignore an arrest warrant against our Prime Minister, but we don't need to say we're doing it for the ICC. On the contrary, we would say, okay, let's investigate if there is an issue of starvation in Gaza independently, and this would be our results for this investigation, and the ICC will need to face that as a fact, because we had an investigation. They will need to explain, Khan will need to explain the court why this investigation is not enough to fulfill this condition.
So Avi, it's hard to break away from the feeling that Israel is in total diplomatic collapse right now, right? On the one hand, we were isolated before the ICC. The world was telling us, stop the war in Gaza. Our closest ally, the United States, was stopping certain weapon shipments to Israel after a period of great closeness and support from President Biden and his administration. Growing frustration with the government, the distance now with the whole Saudi normalization that seems to be moving potentially away from us. But now ICC, recognition unilaterally by countries in Western Europe of a Palestinian state, long one of Israel's big battles. And of course, I mean, I'm getting into the so-called Hasbara PR issues that we always face.
And the
But I mean,
genocide, don't forget the genocide, Yaakov.
no, of
The
course. I mean,
genocide.
the genocide in the ICJ that's being brought again. I mean, this is a very low moment for the state of Israel in its history.
Well, it is, and therefore I think that, and I hope I'm not illusioning myself and others, but I think that in such a moment, one must think whether the agenda can be set differently and by the initiative of Israel. We have to change the agenda, and I think that we would be able doing it if we will set clearly the nature of the day after the war that we are aspiring for. Very part of the frustration that our friends in the world, I'm not talking about our enemies, that our friends are feeling with regard to our performance is the lack of understanding what is the day after concept and vision of the Israeli government. Now,
And the refusal of the government to articulate what that plan is, right?
yes, that's right. And we have to consider that the United States is actually putting forward, maybe not yet completing it, but it's on its way to devising it, our own alternative, our own option for the day after, which has to do with regional security setting, which include normalization between Israel and the Arab states, especially with Saudi Arabia, and actually preparing a much more effective setting vis-a-vis the, let's say, the real security threat to Israel, which is Iran. So Israel is coming to a crossroad where she has to decide between two options, strategic options. One of them is the continuation of the current way of fighting in Gaza without clear purpose for the day after. And the other, which is the implementing a real vision for the day after in a regional context, I think that if it would be clear that Israel is choosing that course of action, it will impact also the procedures, the processes taken in the ICC. I think it would have the ability to postpone them and even to stop them.
I just need to say that proceedings in the ICC can take years. That's another thing we need to know and understand. There's a time.
Robert, one second. What could take years is the actual court case, but the decision to issue the arrest warrant, right? That could come in the next few weeks, if not months. By the judges.
That could come really soon, but that's not even the beginning of the process. The process, there's an investigation. Arrest warrants could be issued or could be not, and then there's the indictment. There's the court, the case itself, if at all it ever begins, because you need the person to be there. So this is a matter that. With a very big gap between what we need in timely fashion, as Avi said, to do things, to change what's going on now, and this will hunt us for quite a while. It could be that it may have some kind of an effect, a chilling effect on the court, if things are getting better here. But it's not automatic. It's
right. Avi, the Biden administration, which has been increasingly frustrated with the government and with Netanyahu, do you think that to some extent they're kind of, I don't want to say smiling or happy, but more of we told you so? I mean, we warned you going down this road. You should have listened to us.
Well, I think that nobody in America, which is a friend of Israel, is delighted with the current situation. I think that they are frustrated with the performance of Israel, even with the performance of the IDF, and they are growingly seeing the impact of the situation here on the United States national security considerations. So I think that the moment America will fully realize that it's her interest to see a different situation in the Middle East, especially in the war between Israel and Hamas in Gaza, I think that Israel has to expect that the Americans' involvement would be much harsher than we see today.
Yes, Robert.
I want to say something here, that the Americans understand that besides the issue of Israel, it was an easy target for the ICC. They understand that they are
that
in
they
risk
could be next.
too. Yeah, this is what will push them mostly. Yes, they care about Israel and hope they do, and they are frustrated, as Avi is saying, but America should be and is concerned as to its own people, own servicemen. And this is why America did not even wait. After the Rome Statute came into force in 2002, the Congress acted what we call the Invade the Hague law, the Act, American Servicemen Protection Act. This basically gives the president the right to use force to release any American or ally, which is also Israel, who is arrested by the court. They can also issue some kind of limitations and sanctions on the court. And I hear Congress is also now, there are more bills going on dealing with further sanctions by the US against the court. And that's it. I think America fully understands.
How much though does the court? Yeah. How much does the court though take that seriously? Like these threats by the Republicans to pass bills that will sanction Karim Khan and the judges, let's say. Do you think that as a legal expert, do you think that impacts their decisions?
Well, it's kind of tricky because I would say, in a way, it does affect the court. They know, and Americans already had sanctioned Bensouda before, and it had an effect. I'm not sure that Khan himself is like frightened by being sanctioned by the Americans. I'm not. That's not the issue. But what Khan has been trying to do, even with this issue, is try to rehabilitate or change the grasp of how the ICC is grasped by the world. The ICC, for now, it's a complete failure. Okay, the promise of a international court that will deal with the most important cases in the world and do justice has completely failed. There are certain indictments and very few convictions over the years. Only Africans were actually being convicted, right. And they are not. He's not in a good position. It doesn't need it now. I'm not sure it needs it, but we need to do what we can do, and maybe it will work. That's because our options, as I said, are limited surely on the legal side.
Avi, I wanted to shift gears for a moment, politically speaking. One of the things that I found interesting is obviously all of Netanyahu's adversaries and rivals in the Israeli political scene want to see him removed from office and his government collapse and in a new election so they can replace him. But what happened when Karim Khan made his announcement this week all of his rivals, like Yair Lapid, Benny Gantz, Naftali Bennett, all the people who pretend that they one day will want to replace him, came out and defended him, right? So I wouldn't be surprised also if this also translates into some boost in the polls, because Israelis see their leader as coming under attack by the anti-Semitic world, which is also how he's trying to portray that. Do you think that that will have a political impact for him?
Well, I think that it could impact in the short term, very short term, on the polls results regarding Netanyahu's popularity. But I think that in midterm, long-term calculation, political calculation, it will not change the picture that we know today, that Netanyahu is enjoying very limited support within the Israeli polity. So the pressure for early elections, I think, will just grow and increase. And the real question is not at the moment, I believe, the popularity of Netanyahu, but whether the overall bleak situation will impact and influence for early date of new elections.
It really is a dark, I say, low moment for Israel when we think about the fact that our leader is now in the same boat as people like Vladimir Putin and other, people, real war criminals. That's not where Israel would want to be. And obviously, in my view, there is this double standard and this bias, and there's an undercurrent definitely of an anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism that exists in all of these different institutions, but it's hard to walk away from the feeling that we could have done better to prevent this from happening. And part of that is on us. So while it's easy to blame the other side, we should learn from this experience and say to ourselves, how could we have maybe managed this war and the way we were prosecuting it potentially just a bit differently? And by the way, very different, but also in the same vein of bad decisions, was the one this week by Minister Kari to confiscate equipment belonging to the Associated Press. And I watched this happen and I said to myself, have we learned nothing? Right? During the Operation Guardian of the Walls in 2021, when we bombed the AP building in Gaza, and not recognizing that this is the largest American media outlet in the world, and that the White House will come out against this, as it did, and that was a turning point in Biden's support at the time for that operation. I mean, we saw right away. We saw right away a White House statement. I mean, it's just where is the thinking sometimes of these people who are our supposed ministers in our government?
It's interesting you're saying that. Minutes before beginning this chat, where I finished writing an article saying that what we had now is just the October 7th, or the legal October 7th. And the interesting thing is that when you compare, you see the same mistakes that we have done prior to the actual October 7th. It's a different issue, but it's the same issue. Conceptions were about the ICC, enhancing tensions. He also had a good trick played on us. While he was sending people here to discuss this issue with us, while he was already issuing his statement at the same time. The actions and words without any thinking before, without seeing the end game. All these, let's put a siege, and then we don't put a siege. But and still the words remains, and the statements remains that are just used by hand now, and we won't get humanitarian aid. God, we have a port being built now in Gaza by America, and there's no the idea of no strategic. We spoke about it. No strategic discussion. No understanding of that there is a timeline for this war. All these are are problematic. Even with Khan, we invited him here after the October 7 massacre. He was here. You can't embrace someone when you won't, and if he speaks something against you, you're in a different position. It really reminds, in a way, that you treat the way you treat Hamas. On the one hand, you treated them like a terror organization, and then you brought money into Gaza, allowing the Qatarians to pour billions of dollars on them. So you need a clear strategy, and you make this comparison. It looks just the same mistakes that we say. We are not learning anything. That's the most problematic thing.
I have a one-word response. Oi.
Oi.
to all of that. Well, let me thank Avi Gil, Robert, Neufeld. Thank you both for joining us today. This was another great episode of the JPPI's Inside Analysis. You can find us next week, Mondays and Thursdays, as always. In the meantime, have a great weekend and a Shabbat Shalom.